Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Denise Lim, and I've had the great pleasure of working with the Philadelphia Photo Arts Center to plan and organize our three-part webinar series, Finding Focus in Times of Crisis. Just to share a little bit about myself, I'm a recent PhD graduate in sociology at Yale University. I'm currently a lecturer in sociology at Yale College, and I'll be teaching a course this fall semester entitled Space, Time, and the African City. I also work as a Strategic Initiatives Fellow at the Yale Institute for the Preservation of Cultural Heritage, where I'm working to co-design a survey that measures the impact that COVID-19 has had on cultural conservation training programs throughout the African continent. So as someone who's really passionate about the relationship between the creative arts and cultural sociology, I was really motivated to help organize this event as a means of educating others to think about the different ways we can reimagine art and the role that it plays in addressing collective trauma and crisis. I didn't get a chance to say this in our very first session, but I also wanted to take time to thank and acknowledge Dr. Lisa Kay. She's an associate professor for the Art Education and Community Arts Practices program at Temple University in Philadelphia. When I was first recruiting speakers for this webinar series, Lisa really kindly recommended that I contact Dr. David Herman Jr., who's joining us today. And he was one of our speakers for our first session that we had on July 31st. And then, of course, Yasmine Awais, who's joining us today and was also a speaker in our first session. So Lisa, we can't thank you enough for being that connecting link between us all. And just so everyone is aware, just wanted to alert everyone to what the general structure and schedule will be for our session today. So from now until about 12:30, we plan to have some discussion with our two speakers, Yasmine Awais and Chloe Hayward. I do see that many of you have your cameras enabled now, but just for this first half, we're going to ask you to disable your video camera and also go on mute. Just so that the speakers are a little bit less distracted and able to focus on each other. And then at about 12:30, we'll break out into one of two breakout rooms that will either be led by Yasmine or by Chloe. So we'll distribute everyone. You'll get a pop-up box notification that tells you which breakout room that you'll go into, and you'll just click a button and it'll transfer you over there. So from 12:30 to 1 p.m., you will be in those breakout sessions for 30 minutes to go over some of those images that many of you contributed. And then from 1 p.m. until the end of our session at 1:30, we'll reconvene together again in this main breakout room that you're in now. And we'll give you opportunity to debrief on your experiences with the breakout sessions. And also to create just as inclusive and accessible a virtual space as possible, we also just ask that our speakers today be mindful to identify themselves when they first speak and then describe their own physical appearance and setting, as well as any visual material that we might share with you today. This is done for the benefit of those who might be calling in, or they're only able to use audio only, or they're not able to see us or any of the visual material that we'll share today. We also will make closed captioning available for the video recording of our session today after we've posted it online. And you'll be able to find that on the same website that you registered for this event. And this is really for the convenience of those who might need or prefer to follow our discussions today using English language subtitles. This video recording will also be free to share with those of you who may have missed this live session now, or just want to share it with other people, or might want to revisit the discussions that we have today. And to reiterate, we'll only be recording the first half of the session right now, and then the last half. So those breakout sessions that we have for 30 minutes, those actually won't be recorded. And then, of course, please feel free to use the chat box space to read any announcements that we have from our PPAC staff, provide
Let's wait for a minute. Looks like Denise is having a bit of a internet frozen thing. Um, uh, and I wanted to, I think Denise's script at this moment, Yasmine, she was going to be doing introductions. Would you like to do, each of you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Actually, I was thinking first we should do the we'll do the land acknowledgement.
That'd be great.
Is that okay? All
Yeah,
right,
that's
great.
wonderful. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. All right, hello everybody. So before we begin, I would like to open the session with a land acknowledgement. For those who might be unfamiliar, a land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects the indigenous peoples who were the original stewards of the land that we currently occupy. As our series is brought to you by the Philadelphia Photo Arts Center, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which PPAC is situated. I openly recognize the Lenape Indian tribe as the original inhabitants of Eastern Pennsylvania. We acknowledge the Lenape people as the indigenous stewards of their homelands and as the spiritual keepers of the Lenape Sipu, what some now know to be the Delaware River, and do hereby commit to actively supporting our Lenape sisters and brothers in whatever way we are able, and by helping to preserve and maintain both the cultural identity and heritage of Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and Southern New York. Since our activities are shared digitally on the internet, I realize our other speakers and audience members may be tuning in from diverse locations. I would like to request that we all take a moment to consider the legacies of colonization, genocide, land theft, and state-sanctioned violence that both indigenous communities and people of color in the United States have been forced to endure. I ask that we continue to reflect upon these few key questions. Who gets to belong in the communities in which we reside? What people and communities are seen as valuable or legible? What communities are seen as disposable or negligible? As we think about how to fight for and support our Indigenous, Brown, and Black communities, I invite you to join us in acknowledging that we have a shared responsibility to make good of the time and space we create here today, and for each of us to consider our own social role and efforts of collective decolonization, reconciliation, and solidarity. And it's so good to see Denise back.
Sorry about that at all. I was getting nervous about technical difficulties. Yes, thank you, Yasmine, for stepping in to do the land acknowledgement for us. So just to introduce myself again, my name is Denise. I identify as a Chinese American woman with cultural heritage ties to Hong Kong, the Philippines, and Canada. I have tone beige skin with olive undertones, shoulder length black hair, and I'm speaking to you today from my little corner of my living room in downtown New Haven, Connecticut. And behind me, you might be able to see a blush pink chair, a forest green sofa with a multicolor wool blanket, and two paintings behind me that were done by my cousin's children. So for some of you who might have this for session one, I was at my sister's house and she has the other two paintings from the same series or set. And I have the other two that completes it. So there's one painting that depicts winter. So there's brown trees with white snow that covers it. And then another more abstract painting that has sort of blue skies and splashes of red, pink, brown, and blue. And today I'm really excited to be able to introduce you all to Yasmine and Chloe. So I hope that you feel that they offer really rich and meaningful perspectives because I've really enjoyed getting to know them through this process of organizing the event. Yasmine Awais is a licensed creative arts therapist and professional counselor who found her way to art therapy through engaging in photographic dialogues with incarcerated individuals. Yasmine was formerly Associate Clinical Professor in the Creative Arts Therapies Department at Drexel University and is a PhD candidate in social welfare at the Graduate Center, City University of New York, where she is also a presidential Research Fellow. She serves as the board president of Artistic Noise, an arts-based organization in Harlem that works with youth involved in the justice system. Her research interests center diversity in the creative arts therapies and in higher education. Yasmine is also happy to announce that Foundations for Art Therapy Supervision, a text that she co-authored, is now available for pre-order through Routledge. And Chloe Hayward is also an art therapist, an artist and educator living and working in New York City. She believes in the power of art to heal and has written articles on the subject for Studio Magazine, Pratt Institute, and Artsy Magazine. Her current book project, titled Museum-Based Art Therapy, a collaborative effort with Access, Education, and Public Programs, focuses on identity and the role it plays in the healing of self and community. She has shown work in the annual Love Positive Women Valentine exhibition, facilitated the Women's Empowerment Workshop, and curated a digital exhibition for visual aids. As manager of education programs at the Studio Museum in Harlem, she is working to develop a more robust focus on the intersection between art, education, and mental health. Her work uses the creative arts to process to heal, bring awareness, and promote social change, equity, and inclusion. So with that, I'd like to turn to Yasmine and Chloe, and if you both wouldn't mind, just please identify yourself when you first speak and describe yourself for those who are listening in today.
Sure, thank you, Denise, for the introduction. Hi, everyone, my name is Yasmine, and I am an ambiguously brown person. My multi-ethnic identity makes it difficult for people to place me. In the United States, I am often not seen as Asian, or sometimes even as a person of color. I'm not seen as white. I am simply often not seen. I'm South Asian by way of Pakistan and Southeast Asian by way of the Philippines, both countries with long histories of colonization. I am also ethnically Chinese. Behind me is an exposed brick wall. A large watercolor that features red is in partial view. Also in view is part of a tall white bookshelf and part of the gray couch that I'm sitting on. I am tuning in from the South Bronx, which has a complicated history with land, redlining, economics, poor health outcomes, and pollution.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to join you all here today. My name is Chloe Hayward, and I identify as a Black, Italian, Indigenous woman. I have warm-toned brown skin with caramel undertones and shoulder-length black hair. Today, I join you, and I'm speaking from my living room in my apartment in Harlem, in New York City. Behind me, you might see a photograph of palm trees swaying in the breeze on the ocean with a pink van and a surfboard on top. And this photo was taken in California, a place that I hold dear to my heart.
Thank you, Yasmine and Chloe, for joining us today and for designing a session that will lead our group in an interactive activity that allows us to think about how to use the art making process as a means of creating grounding space and healing. In our conversations previously, I know you offered up some helpful definitions of what grounding means. One can think grounding as an energy, a means of feeling centered, and of knowing. Grounding space can be the creation of some structure and familiarity, especially during times when you feel really uncertain, chaotic, or there's just so right now. So objects, personal possessions, things you have made or maybe surround you can be part of what grounds you. So today's session, Making Meaning Through the Creative Arts Process, with our participants today to respond to a prompt that we posted online and voluntarily upload those images on our PPAC website. So I'm thrilled that we've had quite a lot of really great contributions, and I'm excited in our breakout sessions we'll get to dive in and discuss those. But before we do this, I just thought it would be good to establish a shared vocabulary and understanding of what art therapy is and the benefits that we feel creative arts have in healing, coping, and grounding. So Chloe and Yasmine, I'd love to start us off with just a few basic questions. But first off, what is art therapy?
Yasmine's pointing at me. Okay, for me, right, art therapy uses art making in combination with psychotherapy as a way to explore someone's inner world and to express difficult feelings that we sometimes don't or can't find the language for. In this way, the artwork becomes the third person in a therapeutic space. And it also brings forth the ability to witness what may be going on emotionally for a person, giving that person sort of reflective distance. And it's also very much about the process and not the product, because it's the process that I find is rich with metaphor, and that really gets to the heart of understanding yourself in a much deeper way, and in turn being able to connect with others.
Yeah, I agree with what Chloe said. And I was thinking also about, Denise, what you were talking about in terms of grounding. And I think, sometimes it's helpful to speak about art therapy in terms of what it isn't, because art, for many people, art is inherently therapeutic, meaning that it provides us something. It makes us feel good or elicits some sort of emotion. And I think one of the differences between art therapy versus making art that makes you feel good on your own, or making art with friends or other artists in a studio environment, is kind of that grounding aspect, that structure and familiarity. And as Chloe said, that kind of reflective distance. So in that case, that's making art in witness, with a witness who isn't a qualified art therapist. The other thing I wanted to push back a little bit with in terms of process versus product is that while I am, as an artist, a very big process person, I love photography, I love printmaking, I love anything that requires more effort than simply making a mark, like things that have to be cut and done. And I do believe that's a really important thing about the process of art therapy, is the process of art making. I do believe that the product is important. Like today in our breakout groups, we will be talking about the process, but we also will be talking about the product. I think one of the barriers for people to engage in art therapy is they're worried about the product. And also that when, in my experience, working mostly in nonprofit settings and with people with marginalized identities, not acknowledging like when you have a product that you feel proud of, you feel really good. So I think one of the balances in art therapy is balancing that process and product. And sometimes it may be all product focused, all process focused. Sometimes there's a balance, and that's part of why it's helpful being with somebody else to help navigate all of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that response very much, Yasmine. And I think this feeds in well to maybe turning us to ask you both how you approach art therapy in your own practice. So I know that there are certain requirements you have to undergo to become a licensed therapist, but I'm sure there's also room to kind of shape it to how you want to approach it with your various participants or clients. So I wonder if we could speak to.
Sure. Should I go first, Chloe? Well, my coming from an arts-based background, I am very much, as Chloe described, like very much process oriented. I approach the art making itself as the therapy. While sometimes I use the art making as a way to talk about different problems, I don't necessarily see that as a goal of art therapy. I don't see the goal as making something and then talking about it. If something is spoken about, that's wonderful. but I do believe that the actual making of art, and the destruction of art and the grappling with art is really therapeutic. It's interesting. I was just in a presentation the other day done by the Smithsonian, and a dear friend, Wanda Bermudez Ortiz, was presenting on some of her work that was done at the National Gallery, and just she was speaking a lot about how her own art making process has been helping her deal with trauma. And so I think that whole process of making it is just really important. As I said before, I've worked mostly with people with various marginalized identities, whether that be racial or gender, immigration status, and also physical disabilities. And so the process in which we come to terms with what art making means to us is really important. And I do that a lot of times with found objects. I try to use, I guess in art speak, a lot of low art techniques, not trying to rely on expensive art materials or things you must have to buy at a store, so people can find creativity in their own environments. And I feel like that reduces some of the stigma. The stigma meaning that art making is not for me. Because in today's society, art making is meant for certain people, whether that's talented people, children. It's usually just for somebody else, but it's not for me. And I experienced that a lot when I was working in Saudi Arabia. So in this idea of when you feel like it can be for me, once that opens up, then things really open up. I'm sorry, I'm not even sure if I answered your question, Denise.
You did. That was great. Chloe?
Yeah, thank you for that, Yasmine. And I agree. I think that when you're talking about materials, right, that's a way to create space that's inclusive and accessible. And I think that very much ties in with my approach, which is therapeutically informed, community-based co-creation. I am an artist, I'm a therapist, and I'm an educator. And I think that it's important to show up to spaces as my whole self, and in turn be able to recognize all of the different layers and nuances that the people who are in the space with me bring to the table as well. I think that working in community, you're able to offer, to hold, and to witness. And I work with people in community to build together and to learn together. And I think that that's so important because it gives a layer to visibility, especially when working and as a person of color who has experienced systemic racism and oppression. And I think that it's important to use the art product, the art process, to support someone's intention and to witness what manifests in that space. And all of the metaphor that comes with that. I often use an open studio approach where I may not offer specific directives, but I present the materials as an offering, and I hold the space for the person that I'm working in. And you know, they're very much the authority on what it is that they're doing and their work, and we build and make meaning together in that space.
Thank you. I really appreciate you both sharing your approach to what I think will be a really rich activity today. I want to be mindful of time. I know we're already almost at that 12:30 mark. So just to our participants know, we'll be dividing everybody who's joining us in this big room today into one of two breakout sessions. So either Yasmine or Chloe will be leading those. You will receive a notification that asks you to join that breakout room. And before we do that, I just want to invite you all to go ahead in the breakout room to enable your video cameras if you'd like to. I know not everybody wants to participate, but we do want to create a really comfortable, welcoming and intimate space. So of course, to respect your privacy, we won't be recording those breakout sessions. And hopefully you can feel a little more free to share any contributions that you may have uploaded on the website, or if you didn't have a chance to upload it in time, feel free to share it in your smaller breakout groups. You can use those chat room functions. There'll be one of us, either on the staff or me, who will kind of monitor what is going on in those chat boxes as well. So feel free, you have lots of different options for how you want to choose to participate. And with that, I'll let Lori divide us up into our breakout rooms. Great, thank you everyone. We'll just wait for everyone to join the main room.
I think we're all here.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing in those breakout sessions. I'm going to turn it over to Chloe and Yasmine second to summarize for us what was discussed in those breakout sessions, and then we'll invite all of you, if you want to participate and debrief with us and share your reflections.
Yeah, I just thank you, Denise. And I want to thank everyone in our group. I know we had a little bit of a slow start, but shout out to Lori and Nora for making that work. We had a really interesting conversation. Some of the things that came up through looking at the images together were centered around occupying space and how oftentimes the external can be deeply connected to the internal. We also talked about this idea of creating a grounding space in the environment that you occupy, and just noticing altar-like imagery and how nature can be a way to call forth grounding energy, and also how bringing some of the outside into the inside can create a source of serenity.
Cool. I want to thank PPAC and Denise for helping with all of this technical stuff. I'm just floored that we were able to even make this work. And I'm sorry that we weren't able to be a part of your group, Chloe. It sounds really great. Our group, it was so rich, and I wish we had so much more time. We were able to speak about 5 images. And what was really wonderful, I think the first image we spoke about was one that we didn't even get to physically see. And the artist described it, which I thought was really wonderful. So we spoke about, generally we spoke about, like, the way I saw it was like the cycle of life, from like, what do we discard, what is considered trash or used, and from that to cycles of childhood, whether it be through our parents or things we created as we were children, to identifying what is essential, and how things, and this is something that we spoke about in the first session last week with, or not last week, 3 weeks ago with David Herman, this idea of crisis, right? When things have to be broken to get us to be able to rebuild and to find more space within ourselves and within each other. And also how we outgrow our spaces. And one way this whole series is about finding focus is entitled Finding Focus in Times of Crisis. And how do we, utilize this crisis, right? We can be in crisis and stay still or stay frozen, or we can use the crisis to be able to realize that we must break out of our shell, that we're too large to be in whatever is containing us, yet at the same time still looking to our past. And that, I guess, is my brief summary of what happened. But I would, actually, I just realized that what I really intended to do was to ask a participant from the group to summarize what they thought happened. And I love to talk, and I accidentally said all the things that that I saw. But if anyone in my group would like to share, maybe somebody who didn't have a chance to speak in the breakout group, but would like to, if they would like to share their summary, that would be lovely.
Yeah, so same here. That's a great idea, Yasmine.
So I guess that invitation is to anyone, whether they were in my group or in Chloe's group, if you would like to, if you would like to share anything that you that came up for you, and thanks, Marianne, and in the spirit of stepping up and stepping back, maybe for those who did not have a chance to speak but would like to, we would like to prioritize those people to be able to speak up first.
I'll add something. I was in Yasmine's group. My name is Sarah Kremer, and I'm also an art therapist. And I'm in Northern California, where I'm right on the coast, so we're dealing with fog and smoke from a lot of fires. It's a little bit crazy out here. I'm sitting in a room with a lot of photographs and other artwork behind me, and I'm also a white woman. I think what I really appreciated about the conversation is the process of commenting on the last person's artwork or their commentary and finding connection to your own creates a thread that helped us all kind of tie, even though only a few people in our group spoke, it felt like there was a unifying thread. And I kept thinking about what everyone was saying in relationship to my own artwork as well. So it was nice to be able to, without any kind of actual details, to feel this connection amongst our group. Thank you.
I really appreciated the group discussions, and I appreciated looking at images through eyes of the person talking, but also looking through the eyes of the respondents, and then also through your own eyes, and how that multi-perspective deepens your understanding of how the art serves a vehicle for us to see things that we wouldn't normally see. And that's what connects us to the world and to other people's lives, and helps us look in and out of where we are, and helps us grow and heal and change. And I appreciate all the art therapists that I've worked with as I've grown older to heal from a childhood trauma. And I continue to appreciate your work that you do, that you continue to do. And you did that today for us. And I am very appreciative.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Virginia, for sharing that. Is that a hand raised?
No.
Yes,
Okay,
it
go
is a
ahead.
hand raised, but I'll be very quick because I tend to take up a lot of oxygen. But I found, in the context of how the presentation was titled, right, which is something about art and trauma. I found your Yasmine, your summary. You said, I don't have it quite verbatim, but out of a present that is too tiny in it, and I think it's in reference to the shell. Someone was talking about a shell, but through the past as the way into the future, right? So that and I think we did do that in our small group. There was this confluence of the past, the present, and the future, where those things really fall apart. And I've been reading, with a couple of people, Kaja Silverman's book on photography, which really leans heavily on that idea. And so I thought it was a wonderful way of thinking of the way in which art might contribute to healing, because it's a way in which the past can be recovered and brought back for useful purposes, as opposed to sometimes I just go back to keep complaining about what happened. So I thought it was a wonderful summary of both what we did, but also of the point of the presentation today. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much. Oh, and thanks for putting that up, Nora. Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm biased. Well, one, because I'm a human, but also biased because I also, at one point identified as a photographer, and I do feel like photography does allow us to do everything that you said. Also, if we're thinking of like physical photographs, the ability to tear them apart and rearrange them, whether that be through the act of collage or back in the day, when we used to use dark rooms, this idea of being able to alter things with how we will expose the paper, how long we will leave things in chemicals. So that act of really being able to change the story. I was also cognizant in our space when I saw a participant's child running in and out of the camera, how that also made me think of time, right? Like, what does that mean for us? We're all experiencing everything that is happening in our lives right now in our moment, but how are these experiences going to be looked upon by future generations? How is that child going to be looking back on what is happening right now? What will be remembered? What won't be remembered? And that's a big part of photography. What do we remember? What was in the frame and what's not in the frame?
I don't know if this is a good point to maybe weave in some of these questions. I actually forgot that we had a question from our first session that I didn't get to ask, and I thought it might actually be appropriate for this juncture of our conversation today. But we had a participant ask, how can the arts facilitate our ability to listen better to those we do not understand? I thought there was so much rich discussion of one another's images and your responses to that maybe this could be a great point to address that question. So again, I'll just read the question again, but how can the arts facilitate our ability to listen better to those we do not understand?
I love this question. So I feel like language is so complicated, right? It can be. And art is the universal language, images, colors. I'm just thinking about even today's session, we all didn't know each other, and still there was, through the imagery, we were able to listen and communicate and connect with one another. And I really feel that's because art is often able to touch a part inside of us that maybe we didn't know was there. And it allows us to communicate and connect without words and from a feeling space. And I think that in this way, it offers a space that fosters a special type of listening and a deeper way of listening, because we're all taking in information from a visual, more heart-centered, feeling-centered place.
And just to follow up on that too, we had one question from the audience asking how anyone who's participating with us today might be able to access art therapy for their own personal healing. So it's a bit of a kind of practical question, but it's really great just to let everyone know sort of your suggestions for how others can seek out this resource or help.
There are a lot of, well, that's a really great question. And there are a lot of different ways to find art therapists in your area. One thing that I think is great is word of mouth is always a good thing. You can, obviously with the internet, you can look people up, but sometimes that's hard. Just looking people up, just looking at insurance or just looking at location. So sometimes, of course, that is one way to start, just like any other provider that you're going to work with. But as with other providers or any other people that we seek services from, sometimes when we hear from other people recommendations, that could be really helpful. I don't know. I know there are several art therapists that are online in this group right now. So if people are willing to share online resources that people can look up, either where you were listed or other people are listed, maybe you can just quickly say those things, and we could, and then somebody can maybe put them in the chat. That might be helpful. For example, Psychology Today is one place that people are listed. But if people have other places that people should look, if you could either maybe type them in or share them out loud, that would be great. Thank you, Nora.
Just in New York, you can go to NewYorkArtTherapy.org. So, and just nationally, there's the American Art Therapy Association, which is arttherapy.org, AATA, and then in New York, we have New York Art Therapy, and they have a list of current licensed creative art therapists. That's one easy access.
Another place that people could look, if Nora, you could type this in, it's called Art Therapy Credentials Board. And they also have, oh, thanks, Sarah just wrote it in there. And that are anyone who is registered or board certified are listed on there through the Art Therapy Credentials Board. It does have, you can search people by credential. You can also search people, I believe, by location. So that's another way to look. And I see the chat thing is lighting up, so there might be some other things that are happening in there. But I just realized, since this is being recorded, I don't think the chat is shown in the recording. So if somebody could read those things, that might be helpful for anyone who is going to be tuning in later. So I know we said Psychology Today. We said the New York Art Therapy Association. We also said the Art Therapy Credentials Board.
We'll also be sending out an email after the session concludes, so we can include some of these resources in that.
Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful. So we'll do that. And if we think of any other things, we'll also include them.
Thanks, Nora. Any other questions or comments, shares from the group, questions in general?
I wanted to thank everybody and say at this time when so many people, especially Black and BIPOC people, are going through so much trauma. I'm hopeful for this as a tool for individual and community, moving through this time, individual healing and community healing.
Thank you for that, Amanda.
I'm curious as to it seems like art therapy is really beneficial, and I wasn't able to join the groups because I had to stay in the main room, but it seems like it would be very beneficial to work in groups on this in this way. I mean, what you guys have said, and I'm just wondering if that's a norm or if that's unusual to work with art therapists with a bunch of people to sort of talk through things.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Chloe.
No, you go.
Well, my guess is we're probably going to say the same thing, that art therapists do work in groups and individually, but also work with couples. So in a variety of different settings. And obviously, I forgot the name of the last speaker, but there's benefits to both and disadvantages to both. So, whether you're working on individual healing and community healing can happen at both spaces. But obviously what we did today, like in our group where we were giving feedback to each other before you were able to speak, that really only can happen in a group session. That can't happen individually. Individually, you can talk about what it would be like if you got certain feedback from somebody else, or you can imagine things, but it is very different getting feedback directly from somebody else. And likewise, you can't imagine, it's a little bit more difficult to imagine different possibilities when there are actually other people in the room.
It's also incredibly special when people are off doing their own work and own healing individually, and then are able to come into it because you do all of this healing on yourself, and you're doing it for yourself, but then to be able to be of service to the group and to be of service to others, and experience a collective community healing is really powerful.
Yeah, such a good point, Chloe.
Can I add a really quick? I think when you mentioned about the collective potential for it, I was thinking of the protests during the summer, which are very much a performance. It's a performance art. So it's here, it happens, it's gone, boom. And I wonder how many wonderful activities could have been done if people would have been invited to do sculpture, installations, photo, bring your photo, put it on a wall, and have that leave there, leave it behind. I work close to like a train station, and for one of the racial murders, what people did was they did Post-its of different colors, and people would come to the subway and put the Post-it on the tile, and they organized the tiles with the Post-its, and they stayed there for weeks. you know, and it was a way of bringing all these different people together. But even if you couldn't read, you know, to see all the Post-its from the other side of the track was just like a really, really powerful activity, and it stays there.
Yeah.
As opposed to the march, which is over.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a really great point, Manolo. And I think, you know, as someone who works in museum spaces, right? I think that we're at a critical moment where, you know, let's be clear, artists, particularly artists of color, have been doing this work for a long time, right? Where artwork is centered around, you know, experiences rooted in systemic racism and oppression. And so a lot of that work has come out of these traumatic experiences, and speaks to some of those moments and moments that we're even continuing to experience now. And I think that it's important as educators, activists, therapists to use art and use our voices to, like you said, not just have this performative element, but to create something that's meaningful and can last in the space. I know in the space that I work in at Studio Museum, Harlem, we always have a reflection wall where people can come and leave Post-its around art and artwork. That is really, you know, it's all stirring, but especially and particularly stirring.
Well, for me, museum, I keep the cards. Do you still do them? The postcards?
Oh, the postcards, the Harlem postcards, yes.
Yeah, I mean, like those, I don't ever use them. I just file them away.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll add to that, and I'll just say that I think, you know, going back to the prompt that we had here today, I think that's why it's important, you know, in our own lives, as we move through our own lives and we're in our own environment and spaces, to find those objects that can sort of memorialize or recognize what may be happening for us, whether it's an object or, you know, a photograph or a work of art, and hold that, you know, so that even if the moment comes and goes and passes, you know, we still remember.
And that speaks to, I know we need to close out, and Denise will wrap us up, but I was just thinking that brings us to why different forms of art are important and different ways of making art. So whether that's performative, in groups, individually, the process of, the product of, and the reflecting on, why all of those elements are so important, especially during these times now.
Thank you so much, Yasmine and Chloe, for leading us in these really great reflective activities. And thank you all who participated with us today. I know there's so many other things you all are doing, and it's really special to be able to invite everyone to come together to share things that they've made or share personal objects that mean something to them. And partly what we talked a lot about in our first session was sort of demystifying what constitutes art or creativity. Sometimes people feel a little bit intimidated by being asked to create something. But I hope that what we emphasize is how essential imagination is, especially during what we're facing, whether personally or collectively. So before we say goodbye to you all, I just wanted to hand it over to David Herman Jr., who's going to be one of our speakers for session 3, which will be the final session, wrapping up our whole webinar series. So David, if you're still with us, it would be great if you could tell everyone what the final session will be on.
Yeah, thank you. And Chloe and Yasmine, thank you very much for session 2. third session. As the final webinar of our series, this session will introduce visual sociology and its tools for identifying, processing, and critiquing the potential trauma of the visible. So along with Denise moderating the conversation and Dr. Marie Carolina Cambry from the International Visual Sociology Association, or IVSA, we will highlight several visual examples that embody our current crisis, offer practical approaches that demonstrate how a visual sociology might interpret what is at stake in these images, and discuss how visual sociology can provide the critical thinking skills required to cope with the trauma that visual material can represent and definitely enact. So I encourage you all to, if you haven't registered online at PPAC yet, to go and register for the third session, which will be September 11th, 2020, from the same time, from noon to 1:30. And please feel free to share with other friends, family, and colleagues. This is the last of the 3 sessions. So I think we're all excited about bringing this all together. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, David. Yes, we do encourage you all to register, pass on the word. It will be more of a webinar structure, so I'll be helping to moderate questions between our speakers, and everyone participating will be encouraged to submit questions if they have any. So anyway, thank you. Don't want to keep you all, but it really means a lot for everybody to have joined today.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.